Hey guys, welcome back to Willpower Garage. Today we're working on a 2014 Volkswagen Beetle with a 1.8 liter TSI motor, and I'm going to show you how to replace the timing chain. Stay tuned. Okay guys, looking underneath the hood of this Beetle, you can see there's the 1.8 liter. This motor is very similar to the 2 liter TFSI version. There are a few differences. If you've seen any of my other videos, I've done a lot more 2 liters than I have 1.8, so I figured might as well do a video on how to do that. The 1.8 sitting in here, obviously the front of the motor is here, so we are going to need to remove the coolant overflow, move the washer fill here, obviously take out the motor mount so we can gain access to all the covers. We'll also have to go down below, remove the splash shields so we can gain access to the front crank. Couple of things though, you will need something to support the engine, either an engine bar that goes across, you can use the hooks that are in here to hold the motor up, or you can use just a block of wood and a floor jack underneath the oil pan just to kind of hold it up where it needs to be. Be careful, some of these do have a plastic oil pan, not to mention the metal one is also pretty soft. You want to be careful with that. So first things first, we're going to gain some access here. We're going to get this stuff out of the way, all the coolant hoses, the fuel lines, stuff like that. Then we can start taking off things like the cam adjuster here so we can get this front cover off. And then we'll work our way down. We're going to have to remove the serpentine belt so we can gain access to the lower cover, which we're going to have to take off the balancer, remove that cover so we can get access to the full timing system. Underneath the car here, I need to gain access to get the turbo charge pipe off, which goes from the turbo here to the intercooler. I removed it completely. It's held on with two T35s, or T30s rather. The other thing is I removed the tensioner pulley here, so I have a little better access to get to the cover. The other thing I want to make sure to mention is you need to drain the oil out of the oil pan. Otherwise, depending on how much you have the engine tilted down, when you take this cover off, the oil is just going to pour out of here. So expect to do an oil change as well if you're doing this repair. So from here, the only other things I need to take off is I'm going to take the outlet of the turbo here off. There's 3 T30s around this flange, and the reason is to get the cover off, it's no problem, but when you go to put this cover back on with sealant on there, you're going to want to be able to put this thing on straight and even, and this is going to get into the way. So I'm going to take that off. I'm going to pull the dipstick tube out. Before I take the cover off and the harmonic balancer off though, I'm going to set this thing at top dead center. And there are a couple of marks that usually confuse people on these motors. There is a mark on the top of the cover, similar to the old 2 liters or the old generation 1.8s. And on these TSI motors, there is a mark here on the side. This is the TDC mark for these engines. So make sure that when you set your balancer, you're setting it to this mark here at the, what did you say? This is about 3:30, 4 o'clock position, not the 12 o'clock position. Otherwise, your timing will be off. If your timing is okay and you're just doing this for maintenance, once you have it timed here, your marks on the camshaft should be relatively straight up. If they're not, you're not in the right timing mark. So before you take all this off, at least get this thing to TDC. so you don't have to rotate the crank or the cam with any of the valves open. You don't want to bend the valves. Even if you hit them gently, you can damage the valves, so be very careful with that. So I'm going to set my timing here first, and then I'm going to take this turbo outlet off, get my cover off, and then we'll have full access to the timing chains. Okay, so I have the upper cover and the lower cover off. All my timing components are still on. As you can see, I put the bolt for the harmonic balancer back into the sprocket. The reason is I want to keep it in place, since that is essentially keyed into place. I don't want it to move, mostly because I just wanted to verify timing here. The reason I am taking this apart is not because I need to replace the timing components. What I need to do is fix the timing. Someone recently did the timing on this and didn't set the timing properly. So that's basically why I'm doing this video. I figured I could show you guys how to set the timing properly. Obviously I'm not replacing parts, but I do need to take these parts off so I can set the timing, because I'm going to start from absolute scratch. I'm going to set the timing for the balance shafts, as well as then the cam chain itself. But I could tell from just using my vernier, the distance between these two cams is off, so I know my timing is off for sure. So I'm going to go through the whole procedure of setting the timing. In order to do that, if you were doing this from scratch to replace everything, the first thing I need to do now is I'm going to remove the cam bridge. Need to remove the T30 bolt here with the thrust washer, as well as the cam adjusting bolt here. There is a special tool you need to remove this, and this is a left-handed thread. So you need to take this off. Let's see, left-handed thread, that would be lefty tighty, righty loosey. So yeah, there we go. So we're going to turn this thing to the right to get this thing to come off. Once that's off, a couple of T30s here is going to remove the cam bridge. Once I have that off, then I'm going to push my tensioner here back so I can reset it. I'm going to get my clip in there. Then I could take the guides off from both sides. I'm going to take the oil pump chain off here. Don't have to worry about, there's no timing for this itself. This is just, rides just to drive the oil pump. But I will take the oil pump tensioner off, and then I can get access to the balance shaft chain that's down there. And, I'll show you guys a little better once I have, to that point. I'll be able to get a better camera angle. It's a little hard in the Beetle here, or any front-wheel drive Volkswagen for that matter, because of the way the engine sits. It's been a few days. I was waiting on parts for this. Again, whoever put this together last basically put on the sprocket for the crankshaft wrong, so it wasn't sitting flat. The balancer wasn't flat, and it was actually making the timing chain, it was making the chain for the oil pump rub through the front cover. So I was a little worried about that thing actually causing a leak. I had to order a front cover, and also order a new crank sprocket because it wasn't sitting in here right. It damaged the little machine way here where it keeps it in time. So now that I have everything I need, I wanted to show you guys. I have everything here cleaned up really, really well. So I want to emphasize, take your time, clean all that old silicone out. If yours has the groove here, clean that out. I usually use like an old flathead screwdriver to get in there and scrape it all out. Brake clean to dry it up so it's nice and clean. especially in these corners, because you will put a little extra sealant in those corners there to reseal everything. But just take your time here and make sure all the old gasket material is off. Same goes for the cover that goes on here. If you're reusing the cover, take your time, clean it off really well. A couple of things here I want to show you guys. Now, this does have a flat spot here on the crankshaft. Not all of them have this red mark. I'm not sure exactly what that is, but this flat spot should be basically parallel with the flat spots from the main bearing cap. I mean, in here especially, you can see the piston here is at top dead center. It doesn't have to be perfect, just needs to be close. So when you're putting the timing chains on, the valve timing isn't going to hit the pistons at all. A couple of things I do as well. The balance shafts, this is the mark here where you're going to be putting the balance shaft chain. I mark that with some paint. And in here, might be a little hard to see. I have marked this already. But on the back helical cut gear there are 2 dots that correspond to the 1 dot here on the balance shaft. So make sure those are lined up. And that is the timing mark that's going to go onto that timing chain that correlates to the lower sprocket here. So I just wanted to show you guys all this stuff to make sure, you know, this will help you in putting everything into place as you start reassembling. Obviously, you know, the thing had oil in it, so as I'm putting stuff together, it's not uncommon for some of this oil here to drain down and get on my surface. Don't worry about that. When we're about to put the cover back on, we'll hit this with some brake clean again, dry it all up, and then we'll put our sealant in. The only other thing I want to mention is make sure that any loose silicone you have doesn't go into the oil pan. It will clog up the oil pump pickup and you will have oil starvation issues. So as you're cleaning up the silicone, just make sure none of it goes down into the oil pan. I've got all my guides, my chains, tensioners, everything's all laid out nice and clean. This is even my crank bolt. I have my new cover here. Again, if you're reusing your cover, make sure the surfaces here are nice. Scrape out the little groove that's there so it is clean as well. If you did bend it at all, prying it off, make sure you straighten that up or you will have leaks. It's also a good time to change your front seal if you have it off. But like I said, I had to replace my cover because it basically ground through from the timing chain here. So new cover there. Since I'm only doing this job because the timing was off and it was done incorrectly, I went ahead and I cleaned all my guides, all my fasteners here. They're all clean of grease and oil. A couple of reasons. I like to put blue Loctite on this stuff, but I've got everything laid out. All my chains are all nice and clean. I have my new sprocket here. So everything's ready to go. There's the flat spot that correlates to the flat spot in the on the crankshaft itself. There is a mark there. What Volkswagen says to do is transfer that mark to one of the teeth. So you can see I have it right there. And the idea is that way when this thing is sitting on there, you know it's in the right place. What I also like to do is I remove the O-ring seal from the bolt because I don't have the special tool that holds this into place. I will run this bolt into place to hold this sprocket so it is in time until I'm ready to put my damper on. So I'll go over that once we're ready to this spot. Okay, since I have it up, I figured I'd show you guys some of the things that were shown in a picture right from Elsa. Here is the crankshaft showing you the where the flat spot should be. Like I said, perpendicular to where the bearing cap sits. There's the flat spot and how they describe how to transfer the mark. Here is the intake balance shaft. You can see the dots there that need to line up for that balance shaft. And then here is the beginning installs of the timing chain. So basically my colored links are going to line up with the dot that I have on the exhaust balance shaft. the dot that's on the intake balance shaft. And once we have our guide in place, it will line up with, where is it here? It's a little hard to see in the picture, but it will line up with the tooth mark that's on the large sprocket there. Basically, they have you put all these chains into place like this because, you know, the oil pump chain's a little tight to get on or into place without removing that sprocket. And you want to make sure that sprocket's in the right place before you, you know, as you're timing all this stuff. Otherwise, your timing will be off. You can damage it. Just make sure everything's going on correctly. So, again, I'll refer back to this if we need to. But basically, we're going to start here and we're going to get the balance shafts on. We're going to lay on our main timing chain, just as you see here, just to kind of hold it up. Again, the marks here that show so you know this thing is in time. And yeah, start putting this thing together. All right, so I've been getting a lot of requests to do some of these jobs real time instead of fast forwarding through it. So I'm going to do my very best to try to show you guys this real time. I probably will still edit out some of my ums and stuff like that. But let's see if we can't do this real time. So first thing first, the balance shaft chain here. And I always get a little confused at which links go to which, but it only goes on one way. See, there's a couple of double links here. The single link on my exhaust balance shaft, the single link on my intake balance shaft there, and then this link, which is going to correlate to the sprocket there. We're going to put on our guide here to put on a little bit of blue Loctite onto the fasteners. So these have been cleaned with in my parts washer and then with brake clean and then finally sprayed with or blown off with compressed air. So I know they are clean and dry. Same with the threads in the block. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to drop down the main timing chain for the camshafts. The chain, if it's factory, will have 2 copper links on the top and then a single copper link on the bottom. So the idea here is to basically get this just into place. Hang it on the ends of the camshafts. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to install our sprocket. Again, I have my mark here on my sprocket and the mark on the engine block. So I know that is top dead center. You can basically feel where it needs to be. It'll sort of key in once it's there. But we can't forget and chain here. And this is the reasoning why we need to do all these at once. Because the oil pump chain needs to go on the sprocket before it goes on. All right, so now that I have those chains in place, I'm going to get this into its key slot again. Again, take your time. Make sure it is in that notch where it's supposed to be. I use the crank bolt just to hold this into place while I'm assembling the timing chain. There is a special tool for this. I do not have that special tool, but I found using just the bolt here works fine for me. Okay, now that my chains are in place and I've got my sprocket in and my bolt just snug down to hold that sprocket, again, I should point out, make sure you take that O-ring seal that's behind this bolt off. Otherwise, the serrations from this gear will destroy it and you'll have a little oil leak from there. As you saw, I've got my guide here loosely installed. Next one to install is going to be this guide here. Again, we're going to put a little blue Loctite on those bolts. And then I'll run these bolts down. Okay, so the colored link here on the bound shaft chain is going to line up with the arrow that's on the larger sprocket there. So make sure that lines up. Make sure your marks are still lined up on your balance shafts. Then you can install your tensioner rail here. Again, little blue Loctite on there. That guy goes right about here. All right, and now that I have all those run down by hand, they get torqued down to 20 Newton meters, which is about 15 foot-pounds. All right, so once that's in, all your timing marks are good, you can go ahead and install your balance shaft tensioner. This guy gets torqued down to 85 Newton meters, which is about 62.5 foot-pounds. Okay, from here, since we have the balance shaft all set up, I'm going to lower the vehicle down. That way we can get the timing chain started to get installed from the sprockets. We're going to start from the camshaft sprockets from the top and basically work our way in like a clockwise direction. So we'll get the sprockets set up that way. We'll get the guide rail on the front of the motor towards the intake on first. It is a little tricky. Sometimes you need a second person. You got to basically counter hold the exhaust camshaft so it takes the slack out of the chain so you can get the second guide guide rail tensioner in, and then finally our hydraulic tensioner. So let me lower the car down, get it all set up, and we'll pick up from there. Okay guys, so unfortunately from this point on, I lost all the audio from the video. But what I'm pointing out here is the timing mark that's on the intake camshaft, as well as the exhaust camshaft. If you look on the back of the upper timing cover, you can see there are marks where that lines up to for both of those. On the chain itself, there are also colored links if you're using your factory style timing chain. And those are the ones that you want to put onto your sprockets. Like I was saying when we were down below, you want to work sort of on a clockwise direction, you know, from the top up. You might need somebody to counter hold those sprockets. But as you can see, I've got the VAG tool here that holds the gears into place so you can get the timing chain into position. Keep in mind you might have to back them up. There are two different types of tools where you could do that. One goes on the exhaust camshaft. It's got like a pin in there. And the other one you can get in there with a wrench. Right here you can see this is the forward side guide. This one has like a curved section that goes around the crankshaft. It could be a little tricky to get in, especially with the way the cylinder head is designed. Because of this, I usually will send these things up from the bottom up. That way I can get around the crank sprocket without getting caught up on it. Before you go to install it, make sure your timing marks are on your upper camshaft as well as your timing mark down on the crankshaft. Because as you start putting these guides in, it makes it a little more difficult to adjust the chain. So I'm going to go from underneath and I'm going to send this thing up. Alright, as you can see, coming in from the bottom, heading up. Like I said, it's a little tricky to get things installed here. There isn't a lot of room, but once you have it up into place, you could start your guide bolt into place. Like I said, the upper slot there goes into a pin on the cam bridge itself. What I'm showing here is, I like to put blue Loctite on all these fasteners. Before I start assembling, I clean out all the thread holes with brake clean, the bolts as well. I want them free of oil so that the Loctite can actually work. But you get all these bolts installed here and into place. Alright, again, just pointing out, make sure your timing marks are correct, top and bottom. You don't want to, reverse the process. So it's a good practice to make sure your timing marks are in place. Here I'm showing that you want to have a little bit of slack in that chain there so you can get that upper chain guide into place. This one goes on one direction and it is just snapped into place. So you just kind of guide it onto the casting there and slide it on back. Okay, so now that both of those guides are in place, we need to turn the exhaust camshaft. And like I said, there is a special tool to counter hold this. It basically looks like a spanner wrench. It's got two holes, or two pins that go into the holes on the exhaust cam. But I needed to loosen it up to get my tool out of the way. My tools are homemade. They're not the actual VAG tool. So I had a little bit of a clearance issue to get the tensioner rail into place. So I removed that, and now I could stick in from the bottom my tensioning guide rail. Again, this comes from the bottom. Same with the bolt. When you install the bolt, make sure the threads are clean and dry, blue Loctite on there, and get that upper bolt installed. Again, all the bolts for the guides, just like the balance shafts, get torqued down to 20 Newton meters. So again, once these are run down, go over these, make sure they're all torqued down 20 Newton meters. Okay, so back from underneath the car, here you could see the timing mark. I put this on the block to line up that sprocket to make sure it is on top dead center. It is located on the slot that's on the crankshaft. The other mark here is the one for the main drive chain. It lines up with that arrow there. So make sure that colored link is in that location. And again, make sure your cam sprockets up top are both timed. You want to make sure everything is in place before you start tensioning everything. Here I'm showing you the balance shaft timing marks with the colored links lined up on those as well. And you could see here the larger part of that sprocket lines up with that colored timing mark. So you know your balance shafts are all in time as well. Same, these bolts here, 20 Newton meters, just the same as everyone else. Loctite on them, make sure everything is good. Now you can install your hydraulic tensioner, blue Loctite on those bolts as well. You can also install the timing chain tensioner rail. That's just spring loaded, goes into place there. So here I'm showing blue Loctite on those as well. If you are reusing your tensioner, make sure you install new bolts. It's cheap, good practice not to reuse those bolts there. Once these T30 bolts are run down, they will get torqued down to 9 Newton meters, and then an additional 90 degrees. Now you can install your oil pump tensioner guide here. Same thing with this bolt. This bolt is going to get torqued down to 9 Newton meters. Just make sure that the spring is in that little pocket on the upper oil pan before you release the pin that tensions it. Alright, so now that everything is installed, I still have my tensioner locking pin here, as well as for the main tensioner. This one, as you saw before, is threaded in. It's already torqued in. There is no release for that one. But now's the time to make sure all your timing marks are correct before you go and release all the pins to set the tensioners. You don't want to have to try to do it after everything is released. This one in particular just pulls out. You can see how the tension goes right on. Same with this one. It's just a retaining pin. There is no real adjustment on that. On the main tensioner, however, there is a little spring clip here, and what I like to do with it is once the tensioner is released from the clip, I like to take that little spring and I move it in as close to the adjusting, well, the hydraulic body as possible. The reason for that is if you're starting it up cold, it's been sitting a while, there's no hydraulic pressure on there, the tensioner can't go back, so the chain won't ever be slack. This is really good practice for this. Obviously, as things wear, it's going to move away a little bit, but just make sure you set that spring so the tensioner cannot be compressed. All right, now that everything's installed, last but not least, make sure all your gasket surfaces are clean of oil, grease, the old silicone, everything. You want to take your time here. Last thing you want is a massive oil leak after having to do all this work. So take your time here, make sure everything is clean, there's no silicone left behind, all the threaded holes are clean. Take special care in the corners where the upper oil pan meets the engine block as well. These are areas where they're generally prone to leaking oil. But again, just make sure it's clean, dry, blow everything off. So back up at the top, now that everything is timed, I can remove my cam locking tools here. I'm just showing that the cam timing is set, the chain hasn't moved at all, but now you can remove the special tools that lock the cam shafts into place. Basically what you're getting ready to do is to install the cam bridge that's going to go across both exhaust and intake camshafts. Alright, so we're now ready to install our cam bridge. Before we install that, we want to make sure that the area where it sits, again, all the holes are clean of oil, grease, any contaminants. Again, take your time here, brake clean it off, blow it off, get it all ready so everything is clean. On the bolts themselves, again, I like to use a little blue Loctite. Make sure nothing is going to back off. Keep in mind when installing this, the cam bridge has a little bit of a pin here. It goes into the guide. There's like a little slot right there where that's got to seat into. It's also going to go over both intake and exhaust camshafts, so make sure you put a little oil on there to aid in installing it. It's a little tricky to get this thing into place. You want to make sure it goes in straight and even without any kind of binding. So again, make sure you install a little oil on there. You know, be generous here. You're not going to hurt anything. It's all going to be bathed in oil later. So as you can see here, I'm putting a little bit of oil on both the camshafts as well as the cam bridge, and I'm preparing to get this thing installed. Like I said, it's a little tricky to install, but you don't want to use any kind of force to get this thing into place. Just kind of wiggle it, and you know, you should start to feel it go into its place without any kind of real force. So now I'm just going to run down these T30 bolts all the way down. These get torqued down to 9 Newton meters and an additional 90 degrees. These are also a set of bolts that if you are reusing a cam bridge or removed it for any reason, you should replace these bolts. They should not be reused. They are a torque to yield bolt, and once they're stretched, they're considered no good anymore. So spend the extra couple dollars, buy some new bolts. Okay, so the next thing we're going to install here is the spool valve, or the adjuster valve here. This is a left-handed thread, so in order to install it, you need to turn this left or counterclockwise. There is a special tool that you need to both remove and install this. Okay, so that guy's torqued. Now we're going to put in the thrust bolt and washer. There are two different torque specs depending on which diameter bolt you have. I have the 6mm size bolt. This one gets torqued down to 8 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. Again, I've got a little blue Loctite on there. So that's about 70 inch-pounds. And that gets an additional 90 degrees. Okay guys, so real quick, I just wanted to show you on the computer screen the manual that shows you where all these timing marks are. You know, this is just a better, easier way to see what I was trying to show you in the car. You can see the timing marks for the upper sprockets here, the colored links and the lines where they line up, as well as on the cylinder head where they point to. There's the lower mark for the crankshaft. Here's the 2 bolts for the guide rail. You can see the upper guide rail snapping into place there. Here's the special counter tool I was telling you about. There's the part number if you want to get that. You can see it goes into the holes to counter hold that. There's the part number for it, as well as the part number for the holding tool for the sprocket. This is just showing the tool for the hydraulic tensioner, and there's the tool for the oil pump guide. There's the special tool number there, as well as the one for the intake cam to hold it. This is just the general overview showing all the painted marks. These two bolts, these are ones you remove if you're trying to reuse your hydraulic tensioner. There's a tool that goes in there so you can press onto the guide rail. It helps to release the hydraulic tensioner so you can get your tool onto place to hold that. That's what these two bolts are. So if you did have to remove it, make sure you tighten those again. These are the bolts for the cam bridge. It shows two different versions depending on if you have a sleeve or without the sleeve. I've never seen the sleeve one, so I'm not really familiar with what it is, but you know, just be mindful of that. So here shows the torque sequence of the cam bridge. You know, just follow the sequence, get that installed. Again, this is just showing the tool to release the hydraulic tensioner. So this is just referring to check to see which bolts you have so you know what the torque specification is on that. So if I go to the overview here, you could see some of the torque specifications. See, this one shows 4 Newton meters plus 90 degrees. Let's see, bolt 5, just check the torque specifications. That control valve, 35 Newton meters. There's the special tool. Keep in mind it is a left-handed thread. These are the two different bolts for that thrust washer, depending on which size you have, M6 or the M8. There you go, 8 Newton meters or 20 Newton meters plus the 90 degrees. Both of them replace after removing, so be mindful of that. Let's see what else we have here. You know, that's basically it. It's sort of, you know, the overview. Here, this is how much to torque the bolts, depending on if you have the steel bolt or if you have the aluminum bolts. As you can see, there are different torque specifications. The ones I had there were 9 Newton meters because they were the steel bolt. If you have the aluminums, you want to go with the other torque specification there. It's like a 2-step sequence. So just be mindful of which bolts you have when you install this. From here, this is showing how to apply the sealant for the front cover. You know, it's showing to remove the changeover valve for the oil pump. This is sort of in your way when you're trying to remove and install the upper cover. So if you can get it out of your way, or at least swing it out of the way, it'll make installing the cover much, much easier. This is just showing the guide pins or the alignment pins. Make sure they're clean so you can get it on. And then the most important part is you don't want to put anything more than a 2 to 3 millimeter bead around all of this. It doesn't take a lot of sealant. If you put too much, it will squeeze into the engine just as much as it squeezes out. And the last thing you want to happen is oil or the silicone to get picked up by the oil pump screen. It will clog things up. So, you know, just follow around this perimeter, nice thin bead, again, making sure the surfaces are clean, a little bit extra in the corners there because they are prone to leak. But there's not much more to that. I mean, just be very liberal with your sealant. So on these covers, there are 2 different types of covers. One has more bolts than the other. So let's see if I can go to that. I'm trying to find it here. All right, yeah, depending on the compound there, chain cover. Where is it? Here we go. So if you have the 15 bolt and then the other one, scroll up here. Where are you? Sometimes it's a little hard to find all these things in the service manual. It's not very easy, but here is the torque sequence for the 15 bolt cover. As you can see, you know, they do talk about 2 bolts to leave out, and the reason for that is when installing the vibration damper. You can see, I think they call it bolt 3 and 6, but you know, again, there are differences between the steel and aluminum bolts, so make sure you know which bolt you have. As you can see, 8 Newton meters steel, 4 Newton meters for the aluminum. Here I'm showing just, you know, the 2 cross bolts. There is a special tool again for the vibration damper. I don't have that tool. I usually use the vibration damper bolt to hold everything together until I'm ready to reinstall the damper. But that's why it shows to leave out bolts 3 and 6. There is a special tool that holds everything across there. But, you know, tighten those down in the same sequence as all the other ones, and you should have no issues at all. All right, now for the timing cover itself. It's a good time to make sure it is clean of grease and oil before you put your sealant on there. You want to make sure the thing seals well. This is the Volkswagen sealant. I know it's a little hard to see, but that is the part number for your oil pan, your front cover. This sealant is used in a lot of different places. It's really, really good stuff. It is a little pricey, but you know, again, you don't want to have any leaks. So as you can see, my tip was cut for a 2 to 3 millimeter bead, and I'm just going to go around the whole perimeter of this thing, and then on those corners I'm going to add just a little bit extra. Again, you do not need a lot of sealant here for this cover to seal properly. Alright, going around the cover here, nice even bead. You don't need to go around the bolt holes there, just stay within that groove. A little extra in those corners, and put a little oil on the oil seal before you install this as well. Again, one more wipe down on the engine block, making sure everything is clean, and then I can go ahead and start installing my front cover. Just be careful it goes on nice, straight, and even. And again, as you saw from the manual, depending on what bolts you have, is what the torque specification is going to be on this cover. So it's either 4 Newton meters or 9 Newton meters. So again, depends on if you have aluminum or your steel bolts. So just follow the sequence, go around, tighten these things all up properly. Don't wait a lot of time when the cover's going on. You don't want that sealant to start curing. Okay, while we're down here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to install the harmonic balancer. Like I said, there is a special tool supposed to go between these 2 bolts that holds everything into place. So you could take the bolt, the hold tool there. I use the bolt that holds the balancer in place. So assuming nothing happens to the engine, meaning no one turns it over, cranks it over, I don't turn this by hand or anything, it should come off just fine. So I'm going to remove this bolt. I'm going to put the O-ring seal back on the bolt, put the damper in place, and put this bolt on right away. I'm going to use my impact gun for it so I can get it off pretty quickly. Now again, as long as I'm not prying on this or anything, that should not go anywhere. Put my O-ring seal back on my bolt. My harmonic balancer. I've got a little oil on the lip seal here as well as on the seal there. These are my timing marks, but more importantly than that, the notch that's here, there's a large notch, needs to correlate to that. So I'm going to get that into place. Make sure my seal is okay. There we go. And I can see it's in place there. My timing marks are pretty dead on there. I'm going to run this bolt back down. And for now, I'm just going to hit it with the impact gun so it doesn't back off. And I don't have to worry about it. Okay, now this bolt gets torqued down to 110 foot-pounds. Okay, finally, we're going to install the upper timing cover. These bolts will get tightened down to 9 Newton meters. There is no sealant on this at all. Just utilizes the gasket, the rubber gasket that's there, as well as the gasket that seals around the cam bridge for the cam adjuster. I'm going to run these down by hand, and then I will torque these to, I think it's about 79 inch-pounds is the equivalent. So I have my upper cover on, my lower cover on, my harmonic balancer on. This timing setup is basically finished. So from here, I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to reinstall the engine mount, the belts, put the wiring back where it goes, reconnect my fuel lines, my coolant line, reservoir, and fire this thing up. Make sure everything's good. Okay guys, that's it for today's video. I know this is not the Beetle behind me, but the customer was eager to get it back. So after I finished putting it together, cleared all my faults, test drove it, and they pretty much right away came and picked it up. So I still wanted to do some sort of ending to the video, so here it is. Couple of things. As you saw from the video, it's not a very difficult job. Just take your time, verify your marks as many times as you want that you feel comfortable. Make sure your bolts are tight. Make sure you torque everything to spec and in the sequence I shown in the video. I know some of the audio in the video didn't work, unfortunately. You may have noticed I overdubbed it. Sorry about that. It happens. I'm no expert filmmaker, more of a technician. So, again, sorry about that, guys. But I will put in the description below the torque specifications. Unfortunately, I can't link the service manual that I use. It is proprietary stuff from actual Volkswagen. So, if you scroll through the video, you can find the pictures that show a lot of the descriptions and sequences that you will need. But as always, guys, if you have any questions, leave me a comment below. I'll be sure to answer those as fast as I can and as accurately as I can. But I just want to say thanks. And if you haven't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. Give me a big thumbs up. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.